Chapter 1. The jar and the floorboard. The humidity in West Baltimore didn't just sit. It pressed against the skin like a physical weight. From the second-story window of the cramped apartment on 4th Street, Leo watched a matte black sedan crawl to the curb. His 4 brothers in arms, Jax, Dre, Miko, and Kale, spilled out like a slow-motion music video. They were draped in heavy fleece hoodies despite the heat, smelling of expensive oud and the metallic tang of adrenaline. They had been working the line for 3 months, and the fruit of the asphalt was starting to ripen. Leo didn't envy the flash. While they were downstairs counting crumpled 10s and 50s, Leo was in his room, kneeling on the threadbare carpet. He pried up a loose floorboard beneath his bed, revealing a heavy glass mason jar. Inside weren't the drug game stacks his crew favored. It was a mountain of meticulously smoothed single-dollar bills and a silver sea of quarters. To Jax, that jar represented a light lunch at the carryout. To Leo, it was a down payment on a legacy. "Leo, get your tail out here," Jax shouted, kicking the apartment door open. He dropped a heavy, plastic crinkling shopping bag on the communal table. "We hit the mall. Check the kicks, man. Limited edition 4s. We grabbed you a pair, too, but Dre said you probably just keep them in the box and stare at them." Leo walked out, wiping dust from his palms onto his jeans. "I'm good, Jax. I don't need no new shoes." "You're wearing rags, lil' bruh," Miko laughed, draped in a thick gold rope chain. "We're making real moves. Why are you acting like a monk? Come out with us tonight. 1 run, and you'll have enough to buy 10 pairs of whatever you want." Leo shook his head, his voice quiet but grounded. "I told y'all, the old bakery on the corner, the lease is coming up. I'm making a move on it." Dre rolled his eyes, leaning back against the peeling wallpaper. "The candy store? You're kidding. You want to sell lemon drops while we're selling the high life? You dreaming small, Leo." "It ain't small," Leo replied, looking at the neon liquor store sign flickering outside. "It's mine. Everything y'all got belongs to the street. One bad night, one hot cop, and it's gone. When I open those doors, the keys stay in my pocket." The room erupted in laughter, the sound of crinkling designer bags drowning out Leo's thoughts. They saw a sucker. Leo saw a future. He returned to his room, added a single $5 bill to the jar, and slid the floorboard back into place. Chapter 2. The Shopping Spree. The following Saturday felt like a ritual. The crew had spent the morning moving weight, and by noon, their pockets were bulging. In the urban jungle, cash was a hot potato. If you didn't spend it, the state could seize it, or so the street logic went. "Last call, Leo," Kale said, checking his reflection in a handheld mirror. He was rocking a watch that cost more than Leo's rent for the year. "We're hitting the shops downtown. No knockoffs. We getting the real deal. You coming, or you gonna stay here and count your pennies?" "I'll pass," Leo said, sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a notebook. "I need to price out industrial-grade glass display cases." "Cases for lollipops?" Dre snorted, lacing up a brand-new pair of Timberlands. "Man, you losing it. We out here living like kings, and you living like a librarian. Look at us. We got the clothes, the girls, the respect. What you got?" "I got a clean record," Leo muttered, though the slamming door told him they weren't listening. He watched them peel off in the sedan, their laughter echoing down the hallway. An hour later, his phone buzzed with the hall photos. A group shot of them holding up fans of cash in front of a luxury boutique. Pictures of leather jackets that cost 3 stacks and designer sunglasses that cost 400. Each photo was a test, a reminder of the immediate gratification he was sacrificing. Leo looked back at his notebook. He had been researching the Sugar Shack, a defunct wholesaler 3 towns over that was liquidating. If he could get there by Monday, he could buy 300 pounds of bulk sweets for a fraction of the price. He looked at his hands. They were calloused from the double shifts he took at the warehouse, but they were clean. His friends were buying things they couldn't keep, luxury items that marked them as targets. He was building something they couldn't even visualize. He closed his notebook, ignoring the ping of another text showing Jax's new diamond stud. He didn't want the diamond. He wanted the glass jars to put the sugar in. He wanted a kingdom that wouldn't crumble when the sirens wailed. Chapter 3. The Empty Hands. When the boys returned that evening, the apartment looked like a warehouse for a high-fashion brand. The scent of fresh leather and expensive cologne filled the cramped space, masking the smell of the nearby alleyway. "Show him the hall," Jax commanded, his chest puffed out. They went through the items like they were presenting trophies. $1,000 tracksuit for Dre, a designer belt with a massive gold buckle for Miko, a pair of headphones for Kale that cost $300. Each time they pulled an item out, they looked at Leo, waiting for the flicker of envy. And for Leo, Jack started, reaching into a small bag. Nothing, because Leo doesn't want nothing. "I want something," Leo corrected softly, standing up. "Just not that." "You got nothing," Dre mocked, pointing at Leo's empty hands. "We went to the best mall in the state, and you got absolutely zero. Does it feel weird, being the only one with nothing to show for his Saturday?" Leo stood up and walked to a window. From here, he could see the silhouette of the old bakery. It was dusty. The windows were boarded up with plywood, and the for lease sign was faded to a ghost of itself. But in his mind's eye, the boards were gone. He saw bright jars of red and white peppermint sticks, blue saltwater taffy, and golden honeycombs. He saw the neighborhood kids press against the glass. "I don't have nothing," Leo said, turning back. "I have a down payment. I have a business license in the mail. And by next month, I'll have a key. You'll have a candy store in a neighborhood that wants smoke, not sugar," Jax warned, his face turning serious. "You're making yourself a target, Leo. People see a new business. They see a cash register. You think you're safer than us? You're just slower. You're a sitting duck." "Maybe," Leo said, "but I won't have to look over my shoulder every time a siren goes off. I won't have to hide my money in a floorboard forever." The tension in the room snapped as Miko turned up the music. They went back to celebrating their spoils. But Leo noticed Kale looking at his own expensive watch with a strange, fleeting expression of doubt. For a second, the gold didn't look so bright against the harsh fluorescent light of the kitchen. Chapter 4. The Lease. The morning Leo walked into the realtor's office, he felt like a ghost in a suit. He was wearing his best button-down, the collar a bit frayed, and carrying a heavy backpack that made his shoulders ache. The realtor, a woman named Mrs. Gable who had seen the neighborhood rise and fall 3 times over, looked at him over her spectacles. "You're the one interested in the 4th Street property? The old bakery?" "Yes, ma'am," Leo said, his heart hammering. "It's a rough area, Leo. Most people are moving out, not moving in, especially not to sell sweets." She said the word like it was a foreign currency. "People need something sweet when things are rough," Leo replied. He swung the backpack onto her desk. It hit with a heavy metallic thud. He unzipped it, revealing the jars and envelopes of cash he had saved for 2 grueling years. Mrs. Gable's eyebrows shot up. "That's a lot of small bills, son." "Every one of them is legal," Leo said firmly. "I have my pay stubs from the warehouse if you need to see them. I work the overtime. I work the holidays." As she counted the money, Leo thought about the night before. His friends had been raided, not by the police, not yet, but by a rival crew from the north side. Jax had lost his new watch, and Dre was sporting a split lip that required stitches he couldn't get at a hospital. They had spent the night fuming, talking about retaliation. They had thousands of dollars in gear stolen, and they couldn't even report it. Mrs. Gable finished counting. She slid a set of papers across the desk. "It covers a deposit and the first 6 months. Sign here, Mr. Sterling." Leo took the pen. His hand shook slightly as he signed his name. When he walked out of that office, he didn't have a new tracksuit or a gold chain. He had a single, heavy brass key. He didn't head back to the apartment. He went straight to 4th Street. He stood in front of the boarded-up door and slid the key into the lock. It was stiff, protesting against the years of grime, but then click. The door swung open. The air inside was stale and smelled of old flour, but to Leo, it smelled like the beginning of an empire. Chapter 5. The First Scrub. The next few days were a blur of soap, bleach, and sandpaper. Leo spent every waking hour at the shop. He scrubbed the walls until his fingernails were raw and his back felt like it was made of glass. He scraped the old bakery decal off the front window until his arms ached. Jax and the others showed up on the third day. They looked out of place in the dusty shop, their expensive clothes clashing with the grit of the renovation. "So this is it?" Jax asked, looking around the empty, echoing room. "The Empire's sugar?" "It's a start," Leo said, not stopping his scrubbing. "We're heading to the city," Dre said, jingling the keys to a new car they'd acquired. "Big party at a club. VIP list. You've been in this hole for 72 hours, Leo. You look like a ghost. Come get a drink. Our treat." "I can't," Leo said. "I'm painting the back room tomorrow. If I lose a day, I lose the momentum. If I lose momentum, I lose the shop." "You're obsessed," Miko said, shaking his head. "Look at you. You're covered in gray dust. You're eating cold beans out of can and you're tired. We're going to be surrounded by models and expensive champagne. You really think this is better?" Leo stopped and looked at them. They looked vibrant, rich, and untouchable. But he saw the way Jax kept glancing at the door. He saw the way Dre's hand stayed near his waistband, checking for the weight of his piece. They were kings, but they were kings on a battlefield. "I'm tired," Leo admitted, "but when I go to sleep in the back room tonight, I know exactly who I am. I don't have to wonder who's coming through the door. Can y'all say the same? We're winners," Jack said, his voice hardening. "That's who we are. Have fun with your paint, Leo." They left, the roar of their new engine vibrating the shop's windows. Leo watched them go, then dipped his brush into a can of bright sky blue paint. He applied the first stroke to the back wall. It was a small patch of color in the gray room, but it was a color he had chosen himself. He didn't have the champagne. He had a vision. As the sun set, the blue wall seemed to glow. Chapter 6. The Arrival of the Glass. 2 weeks later, the delivery truck arrived. This was the moment Leo had been waiting for. The purchase that cost him nearly a year of skipped movies and cheap meals. The driver lowered the ramp, and there they were, for vintage curved glass display cases. They were beautiful, even under the layers of protective bubble wrap. "Help me with these?" Leo asked his friends, who were lounging on the sidewalk outside the shop, smoking and watching the street. "Man, those look heavy," Dre said, not moving. "And we got a meeting in 20 minutes. "Just 5 minutes," Leo pleaded. "I can't move them alone without risking the glass." Reluctantly, they helped. As they lugged the heavy cases into the shop, Jax ran a hand over the polished wood trim. "How much did he set you back?" "800, Leo said, "for all 4. Found them in an estate sale." "800. Miko laughed. "I spent 800 on this jacket yesterday. You could have just asked us for the money, Leo. We would have given it to you." "I didn't want it given to me," Leo said, positioning the first case near the window. "I wanted to earn it. When you earn it, you know the value. There's a difference." "The differences were fast and you're slow," Jack said, wiping dust off his sleeve. "You're still building the stage, and we're already the stars. Just don't come crying to us when the tax man comes for his cut." "I won't," Leo promised. Once they left, Leo spent the afternoon polishing the glass. He used a soft cloth, rubbing until the surfaces gleamed like diamonds under the shop lights. He imagined the cases filled with colorful treasures, licorice ropes, chocolate truffles, and handmade fudge. He realized then that his friends were buying things to show off to others. He was buying things to build a bridge to the community. The glass cases weren't just furniture. They were a promise that something beautiful could exist on 4th Street. He stayed late that night, just watching the streetlights reflect off the clean glass. For the first time, the shop didn't feel like a construction site. It felt like a sanctuary. Chapter 7. The First Shipment. The day the candy arrived was the day the neighborhood finally took notice. A large freighter truck pulled up, and box after box of bulk sweets was unloaded onto the sidewalk. The smell was the first thing that hit people. It wasn't the usual city smell of exhaust and trash. It was vanilla, strawberry, and deep, dark cocoa. Children walking home from school stopped in their tracks. Leo was a whirlwind of activity. He was ripping open boxes, checking invoices, and pouring mountains of colorful candy into the glass jars he'd spent weeks collecting. "Yo, Leo, what is all this?" Kale asked, stepping into the shop. He looked genuinely impressed. The floor was clean, the walls were blue, and the shelves were starting to groan under the weight of 1,000 different flavors. "It's the inventory," Leo said, handing Cale a sour gummy worm. "Try it." Cale chewed it, his face puckering. "Whoa, that's actually good. How much for a bag?" $1 for a small, 3 for a large," Leo said. "You're going to make $1 at a time?" Cale asked, skeptical. "Leo, we make $100 in a minute. You're going to be counting pennies until you're 80. "I'll be counting pennies that I don't have to hide," Leo countered. Just then, a little girl walked in, holding her mother's hand. She looked at the display cases, her eyes wide with wonder. "Is it open?" she whispered. "Not until Saturday," Leo said with a smile. "But here." He reached into a jar and handed her a bright red lollipop. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. "See that, Cale?" Leo asked after they left. "That's a customer for life. She's not scared of me. She's not looking for trouble. She just wants something sweet." Cale looked out the window at the sleek car where Jax and Dre were waiting. He looked back at the jars of candy. For a moment, the fast life looked a little bit sour. "Good luck, Leo," Cale said softly. "I mean it." Leo watched him leave. He knew the road ahead was hard. He had no more money in the floorboard. He had no safety net. All he had was a room full of sugar and a key in his pocket. But as he looked at the vibrant colors filling his shop, he knew he had something his friends would never buy: peace of mind. Chapter 8. The Grand Opening. Saturday morning arrived with a crisp breeze. Leo had spent the previous night pacing the shop, checking the labels on every jar, and ensuring the grand opening sign was perfectly centered. He wore a clean white apron, a gift from Mrs. Gable, and waited. At 9 a.m., he unlocked the door. For the first hour, it was quiet. Leo felt a cold knot of dread in his stomach. Had he wasted everything? Then the bell above the door chimed. It was the little girl from a few days ago, followed by 3 of her friends. Within 30 minutes, the shop was full. The sound of children's laughter and the clinking of metal scoops against glass filled the air. Outside, his 4 friends pulled up in their flashy car. They sat there for a long time, watching the crowd. They saw parents talking to each other. They saw teenagers laughing without looking over their shoulders. They saw a community forming around a little shop on a forgotten corner. Jax finally stepped out, but he didn't come in. He stood by the car, his arms crossed. He looked at the Sweet Haven sign Leo had painted. He saw the joy inside, and for the first time, he looked small. His designer clothes didn't make him stand out. They made him look like an outsider. He actually did it. Dre muttered from the driver's seat. "Yeah," Jax said, his voice low. "He did." Leo caught Jax's eye through the window and gave a small nod. He didn't gloat. He didn't have to. The line at his counter spoke for itself. By the time the sun went down, Leo's jars were half empty, but his register was full. He sat on a stool after the last customer left, the silence of the shop feeling heavy and sweet. He looked at his hands. They were sticky with sugar and tired from work. He pulled out his notebook and started a new list. Order more fudge. Fix the squeaky floorboard. Save for the second location. He wasn't just a boy with a dream anymore. He was Leo Sterling, the owner of Sweet Haven, and he was just getting started. Due to length constraints, the narrative continues with these expanded details to the following chapters. Chapter 9, The Debt. The high of the grand opening faded into the reality of a Tuesday morning. Leo realized that owning a business wasn't just about smiles. It was about math. He sat at his counter, calculating the overhead, electricity, the water bill, and the insurance premium that was triple what he expected because of the high-risk zip code. Jax walked in around noon. He looked different, tired. The cockiness was replaced by a twitchy energy. "Store looks good, Leo. Real clean." "Thanks, Jax. Want some saltwater taffy?" "Nah," Jax said, leaning on the counter. The expensive watch he'd been flaunting was gone. "Listen, things are a little tight. One of our runners got picked up, and the man expects his cut. I need $500, just for a week." Leo felt a chill. "Jax, I put every cent I had into this inventory. I'm waiting on the bank to clear my weekend deposits. You got a register full of cash right there." Jax nodded toward the drawer. "That's for the wholesaler, Jax." If I don't pay for the next shipment, I have empty jars. If I have empty jars, I have no business. Jack stared at him, a flicker of resentment in his eyes. We grew up together, Leo. We shared everything. Now you're sitting on a mountain of sugar, and you can't help a brother out. I'm helping you by staying legit, Leo said firmly. If I give you that money, I'm part of your books. I won't do it. Jax turned without a word and walked out. For the first time, Leo felt a different kind of distance between them. It wasn't just about money. It was about the line in the sand. Leo stayed up late that night, double-locking the door and wondering if his friends were now his biggest threat. Chapter 10, The Midnight Shadow. The following Thursday, Leo was woken up by a dull thump against the front of the shop. He was sleeping in the back room now to save on rent. He grabbed a heavy flashlight and crept toward the storefront. Outside, a shadow was moving near the glass. Leo's heart hammered. He thought of Jax's look of the rival crews. He flicked the light on. It was Kale. He was sitting on the curb, his head in his hands. He looked up, blinded by the light. It's just me, Leo. Leo unlocked the door and let him in. Kale's designer jacket was torn and his lip was swollen. They hit us tonight. Dre is in the hospital. The cops are everywhere. What happened? Leo asked, getting a cold compress from the back. They wanted the stash. Jax wouldn't give it up. It turned into a war, man, Kale whispered, his voice shaking. I ran. I didn't know where else to go. Everywhere else feels hot. Your place smells like strawberries. It's the only place that doesn't feel like a crime scene. Leo sat with him in the dark shop. The jars of candy glowed faintly in the moonlight. You can't stay here long, Kale. If they followed you, my dream goes up in smoke. I know, Kale said, looking at a jar of Blue Rock candy. I spent $4,000 this month on clothes and jewelry, and right now, I traded all for a bed and a way out. Leo realized then that while he had been getting nothing during their shopping trips, he had actually been buying his freedom. Kale had bags full of luxury, but he was a prisoner to the life he'd chosen. Chapter 11, The Wholesaler's Gamble. By Friday, the news of the shootout was all over 4th Street. The atmosphere was heavy. Parents kept their kids inside, and Leo's sales plummeted. He had a choice. Sit and wait for the air to clear or take a risk. He called his wholesaler, Bernie. I need a specialized order. Sugar-free options, high-end truffles, and those old-fashioned tins. That's expensive stock for a neighborhood under police lockdown, kid, Bernie grunted. The lockdown won't last forever, Leo said. And when it ends, people are going to want to celebrate. They're going to want to buy gifts for the people they almost lost. Leo emptied his remaining savings. He was back to zero. He was betting everything on the idea that the community would choose sweetness over fear. He spent the weekend baking homemade fudge, a recipe he'd practiced in secret. The smell of melting chocolate and butter began to drift out into the 10th Street. On Sunday morning, the police tape was gone. Leo opened his doors. He placed a small table outside with free samples. Slowly, the neighbors emerged. They didn't go to the mall. They came to the corner. They bought the tins. They bought the truffles. Leo made back his investment in 6 hours. He wasn't just a candy man. He was becoming the neighborhood's heartbeat. Chapter 12, The Shattered Glass. Not everyone was happy about Leo's success. Monday morning, Leo arrived to find a brick through the front window. One of his beautiful glass cases was shattered, shards mixed with sour cherries. Leo didn't cry. He felt a cold, hard resolve. He cleaned up the glass, salvaging what he could. Around noon, Miko walked by. He didn't come in, but he looked at the boarded-up window with a smirk. Told you, Leo. You think you're better than the street? The street always collects its tax. I'm not paying your tax, Miko, Leo shouted back. He didn't call the police. He called a local youth center. He offered 5 kids a part-time job, cleaning the sidewalk and painting a mural on the side of his building. By the afternoon, the shop was surrounded by teenagers with paintbrushes. No one threw a brick when the neighborhood kids were standing there. Leo realized that a protection wouldn't come from a crew. It would come from being the person who gave the neighborhood a reason to be proud. He replaced the glass the next day. This time, he paid for it with the weekend's profit. The business was officially feeding itself. Chapter 13, The Tax Man. 2 months in, Leo faced a new enemy, the IRS. He had been so focused on the physical shop that he hadn't fully understood the complexity of business taxes. A man in a sharp suit named Mr. Henderson arrived. "You're behind on your quarterly filings," Henderson said, laying out forms. While his friends were dodging the law, Leo was being scrutinized by it. He spent 3 nights at the kitchen table, his head spinning with deductions and payroll taxes. Jack stopped by, seeing Leo buried in paperwork. "See? This is why we do what we do. No paperwork. Just cash. You're a slave now, Leo." Leo looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "I'm not a slave, Jax. I'm a citizen. When I pay this, I get to keep my name. When the cops come for you, they take your name and your freedom." But Leo did sleep. He filed the paperwork and felt a strange sense of pride. He was a legitimate part of the system. He was no longer a boy playing store. He was a businessman. And as he walked to the bank to drop off his latest deposit, he realized he was the only one in his circle who wasn't afraid of a man in a suit. Chapter 14, The Bitter Taste of Success. Sweet Haven was thriving, but the cost was high. Leo was working 18-hour days. He hadn't seen a movie or bought new clothing in months. He was still wearing the same frayed shirt, now stained with cocoa. His friends, meanwhile, were spiraling. Miko had been arrested. Dre was out of hospital, but walked with a permanent scowl. They came by the shop less and less, the sugar of Leo's life becoming a mirror that showed them the rot in theirs. One evening, Leo sat on his back steps. He had $5,000 in the bank. He could buy a car. He could buy the designer clothes his friends once mocked him for not having. He went to the mall the next day. He walked into the same store Jax used to frequent. He looked at a leather jacket that cost $800. He had the cash. He tried it on. He saw a successful young man. But then he thought about the industrial-sized mixer he needed. He thought about the roof repair. He took the jacket off and handed it back. "Not today," Leo said. He walked out with empty hands, just like before. But as he drove back in a modest, used van he just bought for the business, he felt richer than he ever had. He wasn't buying a look. He was buying a legacy. Chapter 15, The Expansion. The bakery next door went out of business. It was a larger space with a full kitchen. Leo stood on the sidewalk, looking at the for rent sign. He didn't hesitate. He called Mrs. Gable. "You're moving fast, Leo," she said. "The demand is there," Leo said. "I want to start a candy-making class for kids. I want to hire 2 full-time employees." As he signed the second lease, he saw a police car pull up across the street. They were raiding the apartment where he used to live with the guys. He watched as Jax and Dre were let out in handcuffs. Jax looked across the street and saw Leo holding the keys to the new building. There was no mockery left in Jax, only a deep realization. Leo had started with nothing, and now he had the world. Jax had started with everything, and now he had a cell. Leo didn't wave. He just turned the key in the new door and went to work. He had more glass to polish and more sugar to boil. The dream was growing. Chapter 16, The New Crew. With the expansion, Leo needed a staff. He didn't go to a temp agency. He went to the corner. He found 3 teenagers who were at the same crossroads he had been, looking for a way out. "I'm not paying you in watches," Leo told them. "I'm paying you a fair wage, on the books. You work for me, and the cops have no reason to talk to you." One of them, a kid named Zion, looked at the gleaming stainless steel tables. "You really make all this yourself?" "We're going to," Leo said. Training them was hard. They were used to the fast pace. They struggled with the precision of temperatures. But Leo was patient. He saw himself in their eyes. By the end of the month, the Sweet Haven Apprentice program was the talk of the block. Leo wasn't just selling candy. He was selling a different kind of life. Chapter 17, The Return of Kale. Kale had been laying low since the raid. One rainy Tuesday, he slid into the shop, looking gaunt. He didn't have his jewelry anymore. "I heard you're the king of 4th Street now," Kale said. Leo didn't say anything. He walked to the back, grabbed a warm coat, and handed it to him. Then he pointed to the kitchen. "Zion is struggling with the taffy puller. You were always good with your hands, Kale. Remember fixing those bikes? Cale looked at the kitchen. You'd trust me near the register? No, Leo said. I trust you near the machinery. You earn the trust for the register. The job pays 15 an hour. Take it or leave it. Cale stood there, the smell of warm sugar hitting his senses. The fast life had left him cold. The slow life offered a warm coat and a wrench. He took the coat. Show me the machine, Leo. Chapter 18. The Saltwater Secret. The taffy machine became Cale's obsession. The rhythmic stretching of the sugar was therapeutic. It took the edge off the paranoia. Together, Leo and Cale developed 4th Street Saltwater Taffy. They used sea salt and local honey. We need to get this into the boutique shops downtown, Cale suggested. The places we used to go for gear. They love artisanal stuff. Leo smiled. The irony was perfect. Load up the van. We're not going in there to spend. We're going in there to invoice. They drove to the high-end district. Walking into the luxury stores where they used to be watched by security was different when they were carrying samples. By the end of the day, 3 boutiques had placed orders. Leo realized that nothing he had been getting was finally turning into everything the shoppers wanted. Chapter 19. The Letter from Jax. A letter arrived with a prison stamp. Leo opened it in the quiet morning. Leo, I heard Cale is working for you. I heard about the new building. I used to think you were the weak one. I thought you were scared. Now I'm sitting in a 6x9 room, and I realize I was the one who was scared. I was so scared being nobody that I threw away being somebody. Save some sour cherries for me. I've got 5 years to think about how they taste. Jax. Leo sat at his desk, the letter heavy. He thought about the mirage of power they once had. He tucked the letter into his notebook, a reminder of why he never stopped counting his quarters. Chapter 20. The Winter Rush. Winter was a test. The holidays meant a demand that nearly broke them. The shop was a factory of peppermint bark and gingerbread fudge. Lines stretched around the block. People from the suburbs were driving in. Leo, we're out of boxes. Zion shouted. Use the backup tins. Leo yelled back, covered in sugar. Leo looked out the window. Snow was falling on 4th Street. A year ago, the street was a place of shadows. Now it was bright, filled with families. He wasn't just making a profit. He was changing the geography of his home. Candy was a reason for people to feel safe enough to stand on a sidewalk together. Chapter 21. The Rivalry. Success brought trouble. A corporate candy chain opened a concept store 3 blocks away. They had neon lights and cheaper prices. They're trying to squeeze us out, Cale said. Let them, Leo said. How can you say that? Zion worried. They have a factory, Leo explained. We have a face. People don't come here just for sugar. They come because they saw us paint the walls. You can't mass produce a soul. Leo didn't lower his prices. Instead, he started Community Sundays, teaching kids how to make candy for free. The corporate store stayed empty while Sweet Haven stayed packed. Loyalty was earned with a handshake, not a discount. Chapter 22. The Anniversary. 1 year after the grand opening, Leo held a block party. He shut down the street with a permit. He set up tables of every candy he'd ever made. Mrs. Gable came by. You're the first one who made the neighborhood look better than the shop, she said. Leo looked around. Cale was laughing with his mother. Zion was showing off an apprentice plaque. The shop was a beacon of blue and gold. He thought back to the first day, standing in the dust with a brass key. His nothing had become a hub of life. The biggest thing he had saved wasn't money. It was his potential. Chapter 23. The Redemption of Dre. Dre was released from the halfway house months later. He walked with a heavy limp and carried his mistakes and the lines on his face. He stood outside for an hour before walking in. He didn't ask for a job. He just stood by the glass case. It smells different in here now, Leo. It smells like work, Dre, Leo said. I'm going to school, Dre said. Accounting. I saw what you did with those ledgers. If a candy man could beat the system, I could learn how to join it. Leo handed him a chocolate truffle. First one is on the house. The rest you earn. Dre took a bite, and the hardness in his face vanished. He was just a man tasting something good. Chapter 24. The Legacy. By the 3rd year, Sweet Haven was a landmark. Leo was invited to speak at the high school. He stood on the stage in a suit that fit perfectly, not for flash, but for respect. They'll tell you that you need to move fast, Leo told the students. But the most powerful thing you can do is wait. Save your quarters. Build your own floorboards. When you build something slowly, it has roots. And when it has roots, the wind can't take it from you. He saw the kids from 4th Street. They weren't looking at his watch. They were looking at his hands. Hands that still smelled of vanilla and hard work. Chapter 25, The Golden Key. Leo sat in his office, looking at a map. He had 3 locations now, each managed by someone from a neighborhood. He was a wealthy man, but he still lived above the first shop. He pulled out the old glass jar. It was empty now, a trophy on his shelf. Beside it sat the brass key. His phone buzzed. It was Kale. New shipment of cocoa arrived, Leo. Top shelf stuff. You coming down? I'll be right there, Leo said. He walked through the shop, nodding to customers. He stepped out onto the sidewalk and looked at the bustling street. He remembered the sedan, the shopping bags, and the feeling of nothing. He smiled, adjusted his apron, and walked into the kitchen. He had a new recipe to try. Something sweet, something hard to make, and something worth every second of the wait.